I barely slept and got up before dawn to face what felt like the most important errand day of my life. The coffee was too strong, my nerves too raw, but I needed it. By 9, I walked into Riverbank, documents tucked under my arm like armor. The loan officer, young enough to be Emily's sister, studied my papers with polite skepticism. Unfortunately, Mr. Hale, your credit is fine, but not exceptional. Without current wages, unsecured loans of this size are very hard to approve. I knew it, but hearing it still hit like a fist. What about a home equity line? Possible, she said, but the process is 4 to 6 weeks. Expedited, maybe 3. She checked her screen, and we'd need an appraisal, income verification, debt-to-income calculations. 3 weeks. Emily needed an answer by Sunday. By 11, I was crossing town to see Ben, an old co-worker from the plant. 15 years side by side before downsizing scattered us. The coffee shop was nearly empty, buzzing lights, cracked vinyl booths. "John, I'd help if I could," he said, stirring his coffee and avoiding my eyes. "Maria's medical bills from last year drained us, maybe $2,000. 3 if I stretch, 2,000. I thanked him and meant it, but it felt like trying to fill the ocean with a spoon. The drive to Tom's place took 40 minutes through quiet streets like mine, modest homes with modest lives. Tom was my college roommate, best man at my wedding. If anyone would get it, it was him. His living room was comfortable but plain, grandkid photos I didn't recognize. We drifted after the divorce, the way friendships do when life reshuffles the deck. 5,000, he said after I explained. That's what I can do, but I'd need 2 weeks to cash out without getting hammered. 2 weeks. Another clock I couldn't beat. I wish I could do more, John. That's a pile of money to raise fast. He walked me to my car, shaking his head. Maybe she should start smaller, work up to something that big. But Emily wasn't thinking small. Rick didn't teach small. Big goals, fast timelines, success measured in 6 figures. The antique shop sat on a corner I'd driven past 1,000 times. Inside smelled like dust and other people's stories. The owner, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, examined Diane's jewelry box with professional detachment. Cultured pearls, not natural. Maybe 400. He picked up my father's watches. These 70s Timexes might fetch 600 if they tick. I'd hoped for thousands. He offered hundreds. The wedding china drew the most interest. As a complete service for 12, maybe close to 2,000, if I wait for the right buyer. Holding those plates, I saw Diane setting them for our first Thanksgiving. Some prices are too high to pay. Total maybe $5,000 if you're patient, he said. Quick sale, more like 3. I drove home through early evening light, adding and re-adding numbers that refused to change. Ben's possible 2,000, Tom's 5 in 2 weeks, antiques maybe 5. Even the best case left me $40,000 short. My driveway looked like a dead end. I sat in the car with the calculator, running it one more time. Savings, $25,000. Friends, $7,000. Antiques, $5,000. Max total, $37,000. Still $63,000 short. The math didn't care about feelings. I could sell everything and still miss by a mile. The house looked smaller as I walked toward the door, weighed down by the knowledge that tomorrow I'd have to disappoint the person who mattered most. The business plan sat on my table where I'd left it, full of charts and assumptions that counted on a father who could do impossible things. But miracles, it turns out, require resources I never had. I rehearsed all night how to tell Emily the truth. I made a simple Father's Day lunch, praying she'd understand my limits. The turkey was carved, the table set for 2 with my best plates. I arranged everything to cushion the blow of my failure. At noon on the dot, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and put on a practiced smile. At least I had 3 hours to explain. I opened the door, expecting my daughter. 3 people stood there. My hand grabbed the doorframe as my world tilted. Emily beamed in the middle, but on either side, like bookends, stood Diane and Rick. My ex looked uneasy, avoiding my eyes. The man who'd replaced me took in my property with open interest. Surprise, Dad. I brought Mom and Rick cold water. I stepped back, my careful plans dissolving at my feet. "Hi, John," Diane chirped, too cheerful. "Hope you don't mind." Rick stepped in without waiting, eyes sweeping my entryway. "Interesting little place. Very cozy." Cozy, the word you use for a dollhouse or a quaint B&B, not a grown man's home. Of course, I heard myself say, muscle memory politeness. "Come in." They filed past into the living room, and the space I thought was fine shrank by half. Rick moved like an owner, touching a book spine, nudging a frame straight, dropping into my chair like it was his. Emily turned in the middle, arms out. "Isn't this perfect? All my family together for Father's Day." All her family. The phrase cut me in places no one could see. Diane perched on the sofa's edge, purse clutched like a shield. "Your dad's made this place very nice, Emily. Very comfortable." Another softening word. Comfortable is what you settle for when you can't afford beautiful. "I thought this would be good for everyone," Emily said, oblivious to the static in the air. "You know, bonding. Getting to know each other better. Getting to know each other as if Rick and I were strangers, not rivals for her love." I bolted to the kitchen, calculating. The turkey might stretch to 4 if I carved thin. Enough vegetables, barely. I grabbed extra plates with shaking hands. My careful meal was now a thrown-together dinner party. "Need help in there?" Emily called. No, I've got it." The lie slid out easily, though nothing was under control. My day, my conversation, my dignity, hijacked. Through the doorway I watched Rick scan my bookshelf, pulling volumes, reading spines like an appraiser. He moved my favorite lamp to another table, claiming the best light. Diane's small talk floated about the neighborhood, bright, harmless. Did they finish that work on Elm Avenue? Such a mess when I drove through, when she drove through, not her neighborhood anymore. I carried drinks in on a tray that rattled. Rick had made himself at home, feet on my coffee table, remote in his hand, though the TV was off. "This turkey smells great," Diane said, taking her glass without touching my fingers. Emily bounced between her mom and Rick like a translator at a summit, making sure everyone was comfortable. Everyone was happy. Everyone but the host. "Dining room's right through here," I said. "Everything's ready." As they filed past, Emily squeezed my arm. "Thanks for being so gracious, Dad. I know surprises aren't your thing, but I wanted everyone together." "Wonderful for who?" Her face was so pleased that all I could do was nod and follow. The table I'd set for 2 looked sad for 4. I hurried to add places while they chose seats in a way that told a story without words. Rick took the head of the table, my chair, without asking. Emily sat beside him, caught in his gravity. Diane sat across from her, leaving me the last spot at what had become the foot of my own table. The pecking order was set before the first bite. Not that we'd say grace. I'd learned not to suggest anything that might make the new husband uncomfortable. The moment we stepped onto the back patio, I turned to Emily. Inside, Diane's voice floated through the open window, praising my flower beds. Rick rumbled back, already claiming expertise about the yard I tended alone. "Why did you bring them here?" I kept my voice low. Sound travels fast in a small place. Arms crossed, teenage reflex returning, she answered. "Rick wanted to see your house. Mom did too. This was supposed to be our day. Our time. 3 hours, remember? That's what you said you could spare." "I thought this would be better," she said, chin up. "More meaningful, like a real family get-together instead of an obligation." Obligation hung between us. I walked deeper into the garden, away from the windows. She followed, heels clicking on the stone path I laid 5 years ago. "You planned this," I said. Not a question. The surprise, bringing them both. This wasn't spur of the moment. She fiddled with an earring, the old tell. Rick thought it'd be good for everyone to spend time. You know, blended family bonding. Blended family, another phrase that erased the idea that I wasn't replaceable. "What did you tell them about yesterday? About your business idea?" "Nothing yet," she said, glancing back through the window. "I wanted today to go well first. You know how Mom gets about money talk. Relief, then dread. If she hadn't mentioned the money, it was coming, with an audience. Emily, about what we discussed. We can talk later, Dad, she cut in. I just want everyone to get along. She checked her watch, an expensive face I didn't recognize. There's time to work out details, as if my empty wallet were a scheduling hiccup. Laughter from inside, Rick's voice, rich and pleased with himself. He's really trying, she said. This isn't easy for him either, coming to to your house. His what? His wife's ex's place? Territory already taken? The pause told the truth. I appreciate the effort, I lied. But next time, a little heads up would... There won't be a next time if today goes badly, she said, tone sharpening. I'm trying to build something, Dad. Something that works for everyone. That means flexibility from all parties. All parties. I was an agenda item in my own life. I thought you'd be happy, she went on. Having your whole family for Father's Day? Isn't that what fathers want? Their kids surrounded by people who love them? People who love them, apparently including Rick. Through the window, I saw him opening my cabinets, checking contents. Diane hovered, torn between stopping him and avoiding conflict. He was mapping my home like a general planning occupation. Your phone's buzzing, Emily said, nodding at my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a robocall. 3 missed calls from Ben. My pulse jumped. Maybe good news. But Emily was already headed for the door. Don't be long. Lunch is getting cold and Rick hates cold food. Rick hates cold food. In my house, my preferences were secondary. I followed, the phone heavy in my pocket. Whatever Ben had to say would wait. Right now I had to play host while Rick finished his quiet inventory of my life. At the door, Emily turned back once more. I really hope this works out, Dad. For everyone. The warning was clear. Sometimes you have to adapt to new family dynamics, she said. That's how life evolves. Life evolves. My role had evolved from father to supporting cast. The voices inside grew louder as we reached the door. Rick was holding court. Diane laughed at the right times, doing her part. Emily breezed in, bright as a stage light. Lunch is ready. I followed, noticing how naturally she acted like co-host. Rick rose from scrutinizing my spice rack. Diane set down a photo she'd been studying. Emily's graduation. Face unreadable. The dining room felt smaller with 4 around my modest table. I'd added place settings in a hurry. The mismatched chairs and tight squeeze advertised my bachelor life. Rick slid into the head chair, my chair, with the ease of someone used to the best spot. Emily took the seat beside him, Diane across, leaving me the foot. This looks wonderful, John, Diane said, voice too bright. You always did know your way around a turkey. Turkey's a touch dry, Rick said, dissecting it neatly. Not bad for home cooking. Most folks overdo it. Easy to do without the right equipment. I manage fine, I heard myself say, a little defensive. Emily shot me a look and cut her portion into small, perfect bites. Curious how you manage a house this size alone, Rick went on, eyes sweeping the room like an appraiser. Must be a lot of maintenance. The house isn't that big, I said carefully, spooning cranberry sauce with hands that wanted to shake. Just right for one. Still, he gestured toward the molding. Heating all those rooms, property taxes, economic efficiency suggests something more. Compact. Emily laughed, sharp in the tight room. Rick's always optimizing. It's why he's so successful. Successful, unlike her father, apparently. Diane tried to rescue the mood. The neighborhood's kept its charm. Those oaks must be 60 years old. Mature trees add value, Rick agreed, then added, the gutters need work and the front steps cracking. Every comment was a precise cut. My home wasn't just a place, it was evidence of decline. I focused on carving. The knife felt heavier. The meal I'd prepared with care was being eaten by people tallying my shortcomings. Dad always makes the best holiday meals, Emily said, but it sounded thin. Remember that Christmas stuffing with chestnuts? That was great, Diane chimed. You always care about the details. Details matter, Rick said, reaching across me for salt without asking. Though it's more efficient to delegate. Catering frees time for more important things. More important than a father cooking for his daughter. The implication hung like strong perfume. Emily checked her phone and looked satisfied. This is exactly what I wanted. All my parents at one table. All her parents. Another demotion. From father to committee member. Wine would go with this, Rick observed, eyeing his water. A nice Pinot. We've got an excellent bottle from the Willamette Valley. We, the shared trips. The coupled pronouns. I'm not much of a wine drinker, I said, though I'd enjoyed plenty during my marriage, until it became a luxury. Shame, Rick smiled without warmth. Wine education opens doors. Business dinners, clients, social circles, essential these days. These days, where I didn't compete anymore. Conversation flowed around me, through me, including me only as courtesy. Emily grew animated, describing her work and bright future, supported by people who understood today's market. When it was dessert time, coffee and the store-bought pie I'd hidden in the freezer, I realized the show wasn't over. My phone buzzed again. Ben's third call, urgent, but I couldn't step away now. I couldn't leave the field while Rick calmly listed my domestic and financial deficits. Coffee sounds perfect, Emily said, standing to clear plates with efficient hands. Dad, you sit. Mom and I have it. Even the cleanup was managed by others in my house. I stayed at the foot of the table while Rick leaned back in my chair, surveying his new territory. Very soon, Emily would remember the money conversation. And then I'd have to confess, here, in front of the man who'd replaced me in every way that counted. Empty coffee cups circled the table. Emily checked her watch again, pleased. We should stay a bit longer, she said, reclining beside Rick. Make this a real family afternoon. She exchanged a look with him that iced my spine. This wasn't spontaneous. It was timed. Rick slipped a hand into his jacket with stagey precision, fingers closing on something that made him smile. The gesture had meaning, like a magician about to reveal the final trick. Actually, Emily, before we settle in, he pulled out a folded check with a flourish and placed it beside a spreading coffee ring on my table. Even upside down, I could see the number in his confident handwriting. $100,000. Emily, here's a check for $100,000 for your startup. Emily gasped, hands flying to her mouth. She hadn't known. Whatever game this was, she wasn't in on this part. Rick, I can't. She threw her arms around him, face pressed to his shoulder. Thank you, Dad. You're such a real father, a real father. The words hit harder than a fist. I stared at the check. My savings flashed in my head like a neon sign announcing failure. $25,000. 5 years of scraping and saving. I have $25,000, I blurted before I could stop it, pathetic and desperate in the sudden quiet. Emily spun toward me. Joy drained into something I'd never seen on her face, contempt mixed with old disappointment, all of it aimed at me. $25,000? She laughed without humor. That's it? That's what 33 years of fatherhood amounts to? I tried to explain the banks, the friends I'd asked, the antiques I'd priced, but she was already moving toward me, furious. You never loved me. The words exploded out of her. I thought you cared, but you can't even do what Rick does without blinking. Emily, sweetheart, that's not. Rick is my real father. He proves it while you sit in this sad little house counting pennies. The slap came so fast I barely saw her hand. The crack echoed through the small room like a shot, then the sting and the metallic taste of blood where my lip hit a tooth. Silence. Even the old house held its breath. Diane gasped, hand to her mouth. Rick froze in my chair, shocked that his show of dominance had turned into violence. Emily stood over me, chest heaving, palms tingling from the strike. I stayed seated, my head turned where the blow had driven it, cheek burning. My coffee cup tipped when I flinched, adding a brown stain to the tablecloth. A small thing to notice in a moment that changed everything. Slowly, carefully, I lifted my napkin and dabbed the blood. White cloth turned red. 33 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, school plays, and graduations, dismissed with one hit. And yet, as I tasted blood and felt the burn, something shifted. That slap was supposed to finish me, to prove I didn't matter. Instead, it freed the one truth I'd kept for decades. I stood. Emily held her posture, convinced she still owned the room. Rick watched from my chair, confidence flickering now that real harm had entered the scene. Diane stared at our daughter in horror, as if she'd finally seen the stranger behind the familiar face. The check lay on my table, its zeros suddenly meaningless, because I held something worth more than money, the truth that would flip everything Emily thought she knew about fathers. I wiped my lip with deliberate care, reclaiming some dignity. The room quieted further, as if the house itself were waiting. "You're right, Emily," I said evenly. "I'm not your real father." The words hung like smoke after an explosion. Her defiance wavered, confusion creeping in. "What? What do you mean?" I let the silence stretch, watched understanding flicker. 33 years of secrecy were about to end in a handful of sentences. "We brought you home from an orphanage when you were 2. Her face went white. The hand that struck me now trembled at her chest. "It's not possible. You're lying." "Mom, tell him he's lying." Diane's tears were already falling as she shook her head. "It's true, honey. We wanted to tell you, but the years kept passing, and there never seemed to be a good time." Emily's knees buckled. She reached for the chair and missed, sliding against the wall. The thud echoed. "2," she whispered. "All this time. I never—" "Your birth parents couldn't care for you," I continued, my machinist's habit of precision suddenly useful. "Social services placed you with us. We loved you the moment we saw you, tiny, scared, clutching a ragged rabbit." Rick's smug look was gone. He sat very still, finally grasping that he'd stepped into something far more complicated. "For 33 years, I've been your father by choice, not by biology." My voice strengthened. "I checked on you during nightmares about before. I bandaged knees. I cheered at plays. I was proud of every win. None of that was about blood." Emily slid down the wall to the floor, expensive clothes wrinkled, perfect hair a mess. "You chose me? Every single day." I knelt beside her, ignoring my old knees. "When you were 5 and afraid of monsters. When you were 16 and thought your world ended because Jake Miller didn't notice you. When you graduated and called me crying for joy. Every day, I chose you." She looked up through tears that had replaced her fury. "But Rick, he gave me the money." "Money," I said, nodding at the check. "He gave you money. I gave you a life, a name, a family, an identity. I gave you 33 years of loving a child who wasn't mine by any measure except the ones that count." Diane edged closer, crying openly now. "We almost told you so many times, especially after the divorce, but you were already hurting, and we didn't want to add to it." Rick finally found his voice, stripped of swagger. "I didn't know. Emily never told me." "Because she didn't know," I said quietly. "No one outside the family did, just the lawyers and caseworkers, and they're bound by confidentiality." Emily reached up with shaking fingers and touched the red mark on my cheek. "You let me hit you. You let me call you a failure, say you weren't real. Because I wanted you to see the difference between a real father and an accident of biology," I said gently. "Rick became your mother's husband and gained you as part of the package. I chose you before I knew you, sight unseen, because you needed a family." The check rustled in the air from the vent, absurdly loud. All of Rick's money, all his shows of superiority, shrank in the face of 3 decades of chosen love. Emily stared at me like she'd never really seen me until now. The man who fought to adopt her, who loved her without obligation, who worried and celebrated every milestone of a life he chose to guard. "I hit the man who saved me from an orphanage," she whispered, the weight of it settling. She stayed on the floor, sobbing, and I stayed beside her while she resorted 33 years in this new light. Diane hovered, unsure how to help a daughter whose world had just split. Even Rick was quiet, deflated. At last, Emily lifted her wet face. "All those years. You never said I wasn't your blood, but you loved me anyway." "You were never not my blood," I corrected softly. "You became my blood the day I signed those papers. Biology starts the story. Love writes it." She got to her knees and touched the mark her hand left on me, fingers trembling. "Oh my God, what have I done?" "Forgive me, Dad." The word Dad sounded different, heavier, real. You loved me without knowing I wasn't your blood. You chose me when my real parents couldn't. You saved me from whatever would have happened. I helped her to her feet. My knees hurt, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. You've always been my daughter, Emily. Always. She threw her arms around me with the urgency of someone who nearly lost the most important thing and just realized it. I'm so sorry, she cried. I compared you to him like money is love, like providing is the same as caring. Over her shoulder, I could see Rick frozen in my chair. The check still lay in the middle of everything, but no one cared about it anymore. All his wealth couldn't compete with 3 decades of devotion. Can you forgive me? For hitting you, for what I said, for not seeing what you gave me? There's nothing to forgive, I murmured, smoothing her hair the way I did when she was small. You're my daughter. Loving you means loving you even when you forget who we are to each other. Diane stepped closer, tears easing. We should have told you years ago, she said. We were afraid it would change how you saw us and yourself. Emily looked between us. It does change things. It makes them bigger, more meaningful. You didn't have to love me. You chose to. She turned to Rick, who stared at the tablecloth. I'm sorry for putting you in this spot. I asked both of you for money without understanding what I was really asking. He nodded, clearly out of his depth. The check is still yours if you want it, for the business. Emily looked at the paper, then at me. I don't think I need it anymore. Not like that. Maybe I should start smaller, build it myself instead of looking for shortcuts. Pride swelled in my chest, not the desperate kind that needs to prove something, but the quiet kind you feel when someone you love makes a wise choice. Your father would be proud of that, Diane said softly. And for the first time in 5 years, she meant me. The afternoon light shifted, laying new shadows across a dining room where so much broke and knit back together. The coffee stain on the tablecloth would be permanent, I realized, but it would be a reminder of the day we found our way back. Emily stepped back from our hug but held my hand. I know this doesn't fix it all today. I have 33 years of taking you for granted to make up for. We have time, I said. That's what family gives. Time to mess up and try again. Rick cleared his throat. Maybe we should head out, give you 2 space. Emily nodded, then surprised me by turning to him kindly. Thank you for wanting to help with the business and for showing me what I was really looking for in a father. I already had it. As they got ready to leave, Emily hugged me again, longer now, without that earlier edge. Happy Father's Day, Dad, she whispered. My real father. The house felt different after they left, not empty but peaceful. I cleaned the coffee stain and put away dishes, moving slow and savoring the quiet. The check sat where Rick left it, somehow smaller now. Tomorrow Emily would call and we'd start the real work of rebuilding. Tonight I'd sit in my chair, and remember the weight of her arms and the way she called me Dad with new understanding of what that word means. If this story resonated, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.